A Local History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby Area, 1844 to 1973. This is audio transcript, 8 of 9, Year History, 1963 to 1966. The audio transcripts were compiled by Sharon Bolton and produced by Michael Pennington. The audio transcripts of this history are available in audio CD, MP3 and Windows Media Player formats. In order to obtain copies of these audio transcripts, or print versions of this history, available in Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF formats, please contact Sharon Bolton by email, at sharonmbolton@gmail.com. Year History 1963. The building program continued to dominate events. In February, Elder Klein arrived to supervise the construction of the East Hull Chapel, with 3 building missionaries, Neil Roy, Ian Taylor, and Dave Fletcher. 2 of those, Neil and Ian, stopped in Hull after the completion of the chapel, marrying Christine Stone and Valerie Kennington respectively. The district now had several young men on building missions in various parts of the country. Alan Kennington in Leeds, Trevor Kennington in Sunderland and Dennis Sanderson in Northampton. Michael Adamson, of York, and Fred Hawksby, of Harrogate, in Scotland, and also George Castle and Charles Madra. Anita, and her mother, Phyllis Blake, went into the church offices. In Harrogate, Eric Page was called as branch president, with Leslie Carr and Arthur Giles as councillors. In the spring, they moved into new premises, at Towering House, with a weekly rent of £7. There were also land searches continuing in West Hull, with prospective sites on Wold and Beverley Road, but neither materialised. An orientation meeting was called in November, with President Thorne and Elder Pearson of the Building Department, to set out objectives and procedures for West Hull, and other units yet without a new building. In May, the Hull District Council was organised at District Conference, with councilmen called and assigned to the different units of the district. Leslie Winard was assigned to Beverley, Michael Reynolds, to York, William Brattan to West Hull, Emil G. Hess to East Hull, Ernest Draper to Harrogate and Reginald Turver to Scarborough. Jack Spur was called as district clerk to President Aubery. As Emil Hess was branch president, James E. Holmes was called to succeed him. He was branch president for just 3 weeks, as he had the offer of a house in East Hull, and moved areas. Michael L. Bamfield was then called as branch president in West Hull. The mission-dependent branch continued in Bridlington, with district officers visiting there, sometimes as guest speakers. When branch conferences came round, there was one held at Bridlington, but the hut was locked and the key was not to be had. So those attending went to Brother Tyndall's house to hold conference there. President Thorne also held a number of meetings for district officers at Rossett Green. One of these was a General Relief Society meeting in February. The district presidencies held regular meetings there also with the mission presidency. The district roadshow was held in York in July, but to equalize distances travelled by the Saints, some meetings were scheduled at other units. Primary leadership was held in Hull and for senior Aaronics in Beverley. 2 combined meetings with Grimsby district were held in York. A meeting for auxiliary leaders, held in July, and a meeting with general board members of Sunday School and MIA in November. To help the missionary program, local missionaries were called in the units. In Beverley, Geoffrey Dunning, David Fennick, Elsie Fennick, J. Clark and Christopher Keating. In West Hull, Denise Morris, Louise Jackson, Sheila Clapperson, Valerie Hales, George Ballantyne, Valerie Kirby, Peter Thomas and Sandra Rogers. In East Hull, Christine Frey, Kathleen Fountain, June Fountain, Susan Twydale, Rosalie Fletcher, Wendy Overton, Maureen Rowbottom, Christine Stone, John Spencer, John Kingston, Kenneth Rowbottom, In Scarborough, James Douglas, James Sweeting, Mary Sweeting, Michael Reynolds, Patricia Southron, Pat Coates. In York, Ernest Church, Peter Wycherley, Alan Wilkinson, Kenneth Church, John Gore, Douglas Austin, David Macomb and Brother Butterworth. September 21st and the 22nd marked the opening of the new Beverley Chapel. The building supervisor Elder Strebel had been called away to Germany in July, so a special farewell social was held for him and his family, and a new supervisor, Elder Morgan, and his wife, replaced him to complete the work. An open house was held on the 21st, when 80 people attended. Many marveled in disbelief that such a beautiful building could be produced by unskilled hands. This was followed in the evening by a concert, and a Thanksgiving service on Sunday morning, when 350 attended, with President Thorne, the Strebel family, and Elders Ogden and Raymond of the building department. The keys of the building were formally handed over to the branch president, Robert B. Thistleton. Progress in East Hull was reported in the Hull and Yorkshire Times newspaper. Progress was reported as rather slow as there was a lack of supporting labour, but great efforts were made to raise missionary funds, with social evenings in members' homes and the Relief Society making and selling toffee and other items. The lack of a permanent building did not stop branch activities. Primary held a series of home meetings in the homes of Sisters Grimsby, Fountain, Walters, and Bratton. East Hull Relief Society also held a series of summer outings. One of these was to the Driscoll home, at Everthorpe, Borstal, where Brother Driscoll worked. Another evening was spent digging drainage trenches on the building site, showing the brethren the way to go. On September 7th and 8th, District Conference was held at York, and the occasion was used to honour Sister Vera Thistleton, who was Young Women's Supervisor in the district. After more than 30 years' service in MIA, she was awarded the Honorary Golden Gleaner Award and Gold Pin by President Thorne. This was believed to be the first such award ever made in the British Isles. The presiding authority was President Covey, of the Irish Mission, who flew over at very short notice to take the place of Apostle Marquis Peterson, who had been recalled suddenly to Salt Lake. President Covey spoke for over an hour on the theme of forgiveness, as did also 4 youth speakers and the missionaries. It was a very inspiring conference indeed. In October, there were 2 weddings in West Hull. The first on 12th, was of Susan Auber and Rex Johnson, both of whom had recently returned from respective missions. They were married by Susan's father, President Aubrey, and afterwards they went to live in America. The second wedding, on the 26th, was of Rita Lawrence and Dennis Hope. On 2nd and 3rd of November, a youth conference was held in York, organized by Vera Thistleton and Charles Dickinson, the MIA supervisors. There were 3 stake presidents and the mission president as main speakers. There was a dance in the evening, and the Sunday session concluded with youth testimonies, and addresses by the 4 presidents. During October to November the film, Their Windows of Heaven was shown in each branch in turn, followed by a film strip and tape on the new missionary program, concerning specifically those listed as local missionaries. The year ended with 2 dances, held at York and Beverley. York Saints were joined by those from Harrogate and Scarborough, making a total of 140, while at Beverley, there were 150 from Beverley and Hull, dancing to a 5-piece band, led by Ellard Beck. Here, district officers were noticed being initiated into the mysteries of modern dancing. Old Father Time Aubrey appeared at midnight, and ushered in the new year. 1964. In January, James E. Holmes was called to the district council, and after attending his first council meeting in York, had a great experience of the Lord's protection on the journey home. It was a freezing cold night with snow and ice around, and he, with William Brattan and Jack Spur, were being driven home by President Aubrey in a hire car, which skidded on black ice, struck a telegraph pole sideways on, snapping it off and leaving the car resting on the stump. There was no sensation of violent impact, and when the car was eventually lifted off the stump by a breakdown truck it was able to continue, very noisily, back to Hull. Later Brother Holmes was called to the district presidency, as Raymond Scott was released. A second event in January was the groundbreaking ceremony for the Scarborough Chapel on the site in Stiffney Drive on the Whitby Road. President Thorne attended with the branch president, Albert Wardle. Two of the oldest branch members, Jenny Wardle Sr., and Rebecca Southerer, who was nearly 83, wielded the spade. The building supervisor, Elder Lloyd, and his family arrived, so work began. Two building missionaries also arrived, Geoffrey Talbot from Doncaster, and Alan Thompson from Cardiff. They had a lot of trouble at first with springs of water and sand and soil, which complicated the early work on drains and footings, but these were overcome, and work progressed. Also in Scarborough, the Coyne family emigrated to America. There were also two weddings in the spring. On April 1st, Michael Reynolds was married to Patricia Southern, by his father Edward Reynolds. Their marriage was sealed in the London Temple on the following Monday. Then at the end of the month, Eric Street was married to Margaret Cattle, by the branch president Albert Wardle. Scarborough was also in the news on the 25th April, when they won the District Music Festival, held in West Hull. 3 days before this, a farewell meeting was held for President and Sister Thorne at York, when nearly 1,000 people attended, as President Marquis Peterson released them. No one was called at that time to replace them, so President Curtis of the Central British came in an acting capacity until President Payne arrived in July. President Thorne and his wife had previously attended a dinner dance given in their honor at Beverley. The food was organized by the priesthood, and John Wiley was in charge. On June 13th and the 14th, a youth conference was held at the Magnolia Camp, an army camp at Headon near Hull, and it included the district sports festival. The attendance of 50 was very disappointing, a figure indicative of a phenomenon throughout the district that year, of the high percentage of youth in the units, which was between 44 and 55% of the total membership, but 75 to 80% of them were inactive. June 16th was a tragic day for West Hull, for Eileen Pashby died. She was a very popular young lady, a local missionary, chorister, teacher, and a friend of everyone. She was also a poetess, and copies of her poems, many of them written for individuals as inspirational messages to them, were gathered together and published in a small book as a memorial to her. In August, the district suffered a great loss, as President Aubrey said farewell as he and his family were emigrating to Utah, to join his daughter Susan and her husband Rex. They visited each unit in the district, and finished with a farewell social in West Hull, when they were the subject of a "This Is Your Life" episode, tracing their 14 years of church activity. James E. Holmes was called as the new district president, with Peter J. Everett and Emil G. Hess as his counselors. The building program in the district continued steadily. On July 26, President Aubrey attended his last major function in Beverley, when their chapel was dedicated by Apostle Marquis Peterson, an event made possible by the great dedication of its constructors. The financial commitment had been fully met before its completion. Branch President Robert B. Thistleton was given the keys at a service attended by the building team, and by President Payne, probably his first major event in the district. On the East Hull site, the last of the old houses was removed so that the driveway and car park could be laid out. In Scarborough, the building supervisor completed his mission, so they were without one for a month, but the building missionary Jeff Talbot valiantly kept the work going until Elder Sewell arrived. Then Jeff Talbot finished his own mission, and was replaced by Bob Graham. Another change made during the year was the advent of the new church correlation program, which included the ending of branch teaching as it had always been, and the introduction of home teaching. The former branch teaching lessons were replaced by guidelines for the pairs of home teachers, and included the involvement of the full-time missionaries. One person, directly involved in all this, was Frederick J. Stone, the Elders Quorum president for the district. In November, Another stalwart of the district, Doris Grimsby, died in East Hull. She had been active in Hull for over 30 years, and was a familiar figure at many functions, with her shopping trolley containing sweets which she sold to promote her greatest love, genealogy. She had no husband, but was indeed the saviours of her family, and a great help to many others in their researches. There were a number of branch events towards the end of the year. Christmas parties for young and old, special programs, including one called The Miracle of Zarahemla in West Hull, depicting events at the time of Christ's birth in America. There was also a wedding in December, of John Lutkin and Irene Brattan, in Beverley Chapel, which was conducted by Robert B. Thistleton, the branch president, his first such experience. 1965. There was another wedding in Beverley in March 1965 of Jeffrey Dunning and Suzette Toes, now returned from her 2-year building mission in the church offices. A genealogical seminar was held in York in January, concerned with families, and a film strip was shown to introduce the family home evening program, a presentation later taken round the units. Another film, Man's Search for Happiness from the LDS Pavilion at the New York World Fair, was also taken round the units in March. On the 24th of January, a special conference was held, with President Mark E. Peterson, of the Council of 12, as the main speaker on the theme, Listening to a Prophet's Voice. Attendance was 433, one of the largest in the York Chapel up to then. The day before this, in East Hull, a farewell social was held for their building supervisor and his wife, Elder and Sister Klein, who had completed their mission. The new supervisor, Elder Kendrick, arrived to be welcomed at their Valentine dance on February 13th. There were a number of changes of officers during March. York Branch President, Ray Scott, was called as counselor to the mission president, Elder Payne, and Reginald Turver was called to succeed him in the branch, with Ernest Draper as counselor. In West Hull, Michael L. Bamfield was called to the district council, and Bernard Mann was called to succeed him as branch president, with William Fee and Frederick Hopkin as councillors. In East Hull, William H. Brattan was released from the council to be a councillor to branch president Kenneth E. Brown. District conference was held in York on May 8, with the guest speaker, Patriarch Holton, of Leeds Stake. Attendance was rather low, but 6 brethren were ordained elders, William Fee, Ernest Myers, Herbert Robinson, Barry Kirby, James Sweeting, and John Headley. Social events were many and varied throughout the district. The district Gold and Green Ball was held in York, with a beat group from East Hull playing for the evening to over 100 people. Beverley had held their own Gold and Green event in March, with members from Hull attending too. Scarborough MIA took part in an evening of entertainment sponsored by the Scarborough Council of Youth, held in the YMCA. They also had a pea and pie supper in aid of building funds. A group of youth also went there from Hull over Easter weekend, to help on the chapel site. Another MIA program, Dear to My Heart for Girls, was held in West Hull, with East Hull and Beverley joining in. President Payne and his family were guest speakers on this occasion. July 18th marked the culmination of 2.5 years' work on the East Hull Chapel, when the opening services were held, with their 2 supervisors and their families, Elders Klein and Kendrick, and 3 church builders, Neil Roy, Dave Fletcher, and Ian Taylor, with President Holmes presiding over an attendance of 330. The branch also sent out another brother, Barry Cooper, on his building mission. One was sent from West Hull as Patrick Allen went into Scotland to work. Another building missionary, Dennis Sanderson, returned to Hull in March, having worked on chapels at Ashton and Northampton for 2 years. Charles Mudra, of East Hull, went on his mission this month to Londonderry, in Northern Ireland. He was a remarkably young man, as he had been in the church only 6 months when he was called. Building work of a kind also went on in West Hull later in the year, when 2 wooden structures, later known affectionately as the horse boxes, were constructed inside the old cultural hall to increase their classroom accommodation. In April, Gladys Griffith, an older member in West Hull, died. She was baptized in 1930 and filled a mission before the war, in Wales. She had a serious illness in 1961, but later continued working in primary until her health failed again. Two other younger sisters, Carol Shreve and Valerie Hales, also left the branch, emigrating to America in June. A number of notable events also took place in Beverley in June. There was a barn dance at Geoffrey Dunning's farm at Lunt. They used straw bales as seats in the barn, and missionaries provided suitable guitar music around the campfire afterwards. John Wiley, who had been branch president, and a leader in many social events, departed to Bridlington as he was transferred there in his job. Another brother, David Fenwick, departed to Manchester, on his building mission. There was also a wedding, of George Castle and June Brattan of East Hull. They too departed, to live in the Leicester area. The little branch, with its beautiful new building, had many fine members, but so many of them moved elsewhere, that the branch never grew enough to fill their empty pews, except at district conference time in September, when President Payne came, and 300 saints, to bring them uplift and inspiration. There were also 4 brethren ordained elders, including Thomas Novice, of West Hull. The last district conference of the year was held in East Hull in November, with Raymond Scott presiding, as President Payne had another conference on the same day. At this conference, a junior Sunday school was held in the morning and the primary in the afternoon, the first time that little children had been considered separately at our conferences. 4 more brethren were ordained elders this time, including Geoffrey Walsh, Walter Lambert, and Dennis Tyndall, from York. East Hull also was host for the New Year's Eve dance, with music provided by John Lutkin and the Spencers, with their acting branch president Michael Bamfield, as Father Time. He was acting branch president because Kenneth Brown was ill at the time. 1966. When Brother Brown recovered from illness, he and his family moved house to Skidby village, so William H. Brattan was called as branch president, with Cyril Leybourne and Graham Barber as councillors. Brother Brown was called to the district presidency. The time the branch in Bridlington had originated in 1962, when Elder Easter was sent to open it up as a mission-dependent branch, it was decided to hand it over to the district, but still with a missionary in charge. Elder Beehner, with Elder Eagle, ran the branch, still meeting in Barron's dance studio on the promenade, but in May, the Tyndall family transferred from York, and became a great asset. They moved into new premises, in the Darby and Joan Club hut in North Street. In July, the district road show was held and Bridlington really came into the district, as their entry, in the theme, Our Town Won the Day. Other district events included the Gold and Green Ball in April, in East Hull, with Easter bonnets and eggs competitions. There was a special 2-district conference in York in May, when Apostle Marky Peterson addressed 300 saints. The first primary district festival was held on Beverley Westwood with 130 children and 50 adults taking part, under the direction of the primary president, Mary Mann. The speech festival was held in York, on Whit Saturday, when the district also said farewell to the Scott family, who were emigrating. There was also an elders' quorum meeting there, with their new president, Ernest Draper, who was also in York. On the 13th of July, a very special baptism took place in Beverley of Alice Wynne, the lady who had been mother to many missionaries labouring in Hull who lodged at her home in the Octagon. 3 days later at 7 a.m., the West Hull Beehives, with their leader Denise Morris, were on the beach at Aldborough for their early bird breakfast, a very special activity for the girls, but saddened because Denise was soon to leave Hull for Germany, where she was to act as an au pair nanny to a family. On August 6, there was a special wedding in West Hull of William M. Fee and Sandra Rogers. Brother Fee was in the branch presidency with President Mann who conducted the service. District conference in October was held at Scarborough. The 15th was a very special day, as Scarborough Chapel was opened, with President Payne presiding and the various building workers speaking. The branch president was then Edward Headley. He was called a month before this, as Albert Wardle was preparing to emigrate. There was another barn dance planned at the Dunnings Lund farm, but it rained hard on the day, so the event was transferred to the chapel. The following weekend was fine, which allowed a girls' camp to go ahead, for them to earn their camp crafter badges. This event started and finished with a hayride on a cart drawn by a tractor, from Beverley Chapel to the farm and back. Beverley was the host again for the New Year's Eve dance, with the Neutrons group providing the music this time. That concludes audio transcript 8 of 9, of a local history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby area, 1844 to 1973.